Hello and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep IAS. Welcome to a session on economy this week, wherein we'll be taking up all the important economy related articles which have appeared in various business related newspapers, and we'll be analyzing these particular articles. For today's video, the time period that has been chosen is 9th to 15th July 2022. Let's begin the discussion. The first very important article, which I'm pretty sure all of you have come across, read, or some of them are concerned, some of you must be confused, is regarding the RBI's new mechanism to settle the trade in rupee terms. Now, what is this idea? Let's start with a very simple example first. We'll come back to the details later. Imagine there is an importer sitting in another country and you are the exporter, you are sitting in India. You are the exporter and here is the importer. And just a repetition here, both of you are sitting in two different countries. So when you will export the commodity, the importer will make a payment in terms of dollars. You will receive the dollars. Now you will convert this particular dollar into rupee. Some of you might be concerned, sir, why should I convert dollar into rupee? Simple. Rupee is the domestic currency. You want to pay wages or salaries to your employees, you need rupees. You want to pay for, let's say, the raw materials which I have supplied to you, you need to make the payment in rupees. One more very important point here. What if this importer, the person A who is sitting in another country, uses some other currency, not the dollar? That is, the domestic currency of this country is something else, not the dollar. For example, what if it is a ruble? That is a Russian currency, ruble, or Sri Lankan currency, or currency from Iran, etc. What they need to do is convert their particular domestic currency into dollars, make a payment to us, right, that is to you, in dollars, and you will convert this particular dollar into rupee. That is a domestic currency. This is generally how the transactions are conducted in the international market. Please remember this. Most of the transactions that India conducts with the rest of the world are no doubt in terms of dollars. More than 50% of the transactions that we conduct, that is the trade that we do with international market, is in terms of dollars. But is the dollar only currency that we are using to conduct the trade? Absolutely no. In some of the cases we use rupees also to conduct the trade, and in some of the cases other currencies are utilized. But in recent times, right, imagine you are the exporter, your importer, that is the one who is purchasing from you, is sitting in, let's say, Russia. Because the Western countries have imposed sanctions over Russia and they have removed these particular banks from the SWIFT system. These importers are unable to make a payment, and that is having an impact on the trade between India and Russia. That's the first point. Second point, this example that I've taken, in that example you are an exporter. What if, on the other hand, you are an importer? You are wearing different shoes now. You are an importer. When you are an importer, you will have to make a payment in the internationally accepted currency, that is dollar, which simply means you are supplying rupees to the market. You are selling rupees in the market, and in place of this, you are purchasing dollars and you are making the payment in terms of dollars. Now, this is generally going to have a huge demand. In case you are an importer, a net importer by the way, there is going to be huge demand for dollars, which is actually happening in the context of India. And that is the precise reason why rupee against dollar, when you look at the exchange rate of rupee against the dollar, demand for the dollar is increasing, supply of rupees is increasing, rupee is depreciating and dollar is appreciating. And you must have seen in the newspaper for the first time ever, this psychological barrier of rupee versus dollar exchange rate, where $1 is equal to more than 80 rupee, has been crossed, right? Which simply means rupee is depreciating continuously. So there is a current account deficit, there is a trade deficit, forex reserves are depleting, outflow of dollars are increasing from the domestic market. Rupee is becoming weaker and weaker day by day or month by month. In this particular context, one way to reduce this particular pressure on the rupee is to ensure that the trade is conducted or the trade settlement is done in rupees. That is the domestic currency. Sir, what do you mean by this? If you remember the earlier example, we traded in terms of a foreign currency. That is, when I exported, I got paid in terms of dollars. When I imported, I made a payment in terms of dollars. So rather than using dollars for conducting transactions, now RBI simply says, why don't we use the domestic currency, that is rupees? How that can happen? Let's take the same example here. A is an importer sitting in Russia. B is an exporter sitting in India. So when B will export the goods or services, the invoicing of this particular trade, the payment on this particular trade, everything will be done in terms of rupees. Dollar will not be used. Everything will be done in terms of rupees. Now some of you would be thinking, sir, how is that possible? How is that possible? What the process has been, let's say, prescribed by RBI is very simple here. This particular country, let's say Russia, wants to conduct trade in terms of rupees, that is settle in terms of rupees. They will have to open a bank account which is called as a Vostro account. I'll come to this. They will have to open an bank account called as a Vostro account with a domestic bank in India. Let's say hypothetically SBI. So SBI will open a rupee, that is special rupee Vostro account, in the name of or on behalf of a Russian bank. On behalf of a Russian bank. And the importer there will basically make the payment in terms of, let's say, a ruble, and this will be credited into this particular bank account in terms of rupees. Now, on the other hand, have a look at this. If I'm an importer in this particular context, rather than making the payment in terms of dollars or ruble, I'll basically contribute, or let's say I will deposit the rupee equivalent. I repeat, the rupee equivalent of this particular amount into this particular bank account or the Vostro account. Now, what do you mean by Vostro account? Vostro accounts are those types of accounts which are held by the domestic branches or domestic banks on behalf of a foreign bank. Right? Rather than the foreign bank getting the direct payment, what we will do now is, we will open a bank account associated with the domestic bank itself, and these particular domestic banks on behalf of the foreign banks will collect the amount in terms of rupees and will make the payment in terms of rupees. Now some of you might be thinking, sir, India being a net importer, what is the final outcome because of this? Right? Remember this. One, because we are making the payment in terms of rupees and receiving the payment in terms of rupees, there is no need to convert this particular rupee into dollars now. There is no need to convert the rupee into a foreign currency. So the pressure on the rupee, because we are converting the rupee into dollars, there is a lot of pressure. The dollar outflows are very, very high. That demand for the dollars will come down. Rupee depreciation to a very great extent can be controlled. Now second thing is, sir, what you said is okay. If I am an importer, I will make the payment in terms of rupees, that is equivalent to ruble. For example, if I conduct a trade worth, let's say, 1 ruble, which is almost equivalent to 1.4 rupees. If I am importing this particular amount of goods, I will deposit this 1.4 rupees into this Vostro account held with the SBI. And on the other hand, if I export and receive, let's say, 1 rupees, what will happen to the net outcome? The net outcome is simple. The Russian exporter is supposed to have this extra 40 paise, and this amount, which is a net rupees in the Vostro account, can be invested in the government securities, can be utilized to make payments for various investment projects, can also be used for any of the current as well as the capital account transactions. At least that is what RBI has told in terms of this new mechanism which has been proposed by Reserve Bank of India. So these are certain very important points in the context of trade settlement in rupee, the new mechanism which has been proposed by RBI. I have given a question here. Consider the following statements regarding RBI's rupee payment system. All exports and imports under this are denominated and invoiced in rupee. Again, I am talking in the context of this payment mechanism. So statement is correct. Don't say, sir, but earlier you said lot of transactions are conducted or settled in terms of dollars. That is general trade. I am talking about this new payment system or settlement system that has been proposed by RBI. First statement is correct. This is expected to increase the demand for the dollars for settling transactions. Absolutely no. In fact, the whole idea or the objective behind this is the demand for the dollars automatically will come down. because we are conducting the transactions in terms of rupees, settling the transactions in terms of rupees, the demand for the dollars is expected to come down. And moreover, remember this is said to be one of the steps towards making the rupee internationalized. That is, internationalization of rupee is expected to become much more now with this particular mechanism of Reserve Bank of India. So first statement is correct, second one is wrong. Right option for this question will be option A, only one. Next article, India-Australia Double Taxation Avoidance Agreement. Certain important background points here. Earlier this year, India and Australia have signed an agreement, ECTA, Economic Cooperation and Trade Agreement. ECTA stands for Economic Cooperation and Trade Agreement. Under this particular agreement, one of the very important points that they focus was amending the Double Taxation Avoidance Agreement, which was signed earlier between both India as well as Australia. Why this was the point that was covered under the whole agreement here? Simple. Whenever you talk about Double Taxation Avoidance Agreement, what is it? It is basically an agreement which is signed between countries, bilateral, etc., or specific to certain sectors, right, much more comprehensive. There are multiple types, but be focused on the basic idea here. Imagine there are two countries, A and B. Investments from A have been made in the country B. On the profits or the earnings made on this investment, if the company makes taxes payment, or if the company pays taxes in both of these countries, this is called as double taxation. And because there was an anomaly in the 1991 DTA, which was signed between both India as well as Australia, some of the software companies which invested or which provided the services back in Australia or to clients in Australia were forced to pay taxes twice on the same amount of revenue. That is, imagine here is a software company A located in India. It will provide certain services to a client B located in Australia. In this particular situation, on the revenue generated by the company A, the government of India imposed and collected taxes. So was the case in case of Australia. Even the Australian government imposed the taxes on the same revenue in the form of treating it as a royalty and collected taxes. So on the same amount of revenue, now the taxes are being paid in two different places. And as per the report here, because of this kind of a double taxation which has been imposed on the software companies so far, that is since 2012, have paid more than 1.3 billion worth of taxes like this. So very recently, when this ECTA was signed between India and Australia, one of the points that was covered was this itself. We want the Australian government to make the changes in the law so that Indian software companies will not have to pay taxes in both of these particular countries now. And that is what is being provided in the article here. India is seeking that Australian government make changes as soon as possible so that the companies, that is specifically software companies, Indian software companies, don't have to pay the taxes in two different jurisdictions. So this is the discussion on this article. Next, a very important article as far as I am concerned, related to oilseed production. The headline of the article is important, especially if you are writing, let's say, mains in the coming year. The reason is very simple. Earlier, that is in the last 1.5 years, lot of discussion has been happening in the context of promoting oilseed production in India. Government of India again and again has been stressing that through various reforms or measures that they are taking. They want to ensure that India becomes Atmanirbhar or self-reliant in terms of oilseed production. Because remember this, edible oil imports are very, very high in the context of India. India imports a lot of these particular edible oils. Generally, the value of these imports are one of the top 5 or top 10 imports that are done by Indian economy from the rest of the world. And whenever there is a supply-demand mismatch in the international market, always there is a supply-demand mismatch in the context of India because the demand is higher compared to supply. But whenever there is this kind of a mismatch, for example, one major exporter of palm oil, right, basically imposed a restriction or let's say ban on exporting of this particular the palm oil to the international market because they wanted to control the prices in the domestic market. And India, being one of the major importers of this particular palm oil, was affected by this particular ban by the government. So understand the logic here. Government of India again and again in the last couple of years has been stressing on the fact that we are dependent on import of not just the crude oil but also on vegetable or edible oils. And by promoting the oilseed production in the domestic market, we should be moving towards the self-reliance or Atmanirbharta. What are the points given here? The points which are given here are basically comparing what has happened to the oilseed production in the domestic market, comparing that with oilseed production in the global market. For example, this article states that the overall production of oilseeds between 2011-12 to 2020 and 21 in the Indian economy has increased from 26.3 lakh hectares. Again, please understand this is not overall production, this is area under cultivation. Overall production, I'll come to that also. The area under cultivation has increased from 26.3 lakh hectares to 28.8 lakh hectares. Right, this is one point. Second, the overall production in the domestic market, the overall production has increased from 29.8 million tons to 36.1 million tons. And in this particular 10-year time span or 10-year duration, the compounded annual growth rate of oilseed production has increased by around 1.9%. Whereas if you talk about the global market, that is overall global production, it has increased from 447 million tons to 607 million tons, which turns out to be 2.9%. That is compounded annual growth rate of 2.9%. So on one side, the area though has increased, but the production has not increased by much. And one of the reasons that the article says is the oilseed production more or less has remained stagnant because the yield rates have not changed by much. The yield rates of oilseed production has not changed by much. For example, look at the data here. It has changed from 1193 kg per hectare to 1254 kgs per hectare. So more or less a very slight increase in the yield, not very great increase in the yield of this particular oilseed production. This is said to be one of the reasons why oilseed production has remained stagnant in case of Indian economy. On one side, the production has remained stagnant or let's say more or less same, but on the other hand, because of urbanization, because of rising incomes, that is the per capita incomes, right, growth of the incomes of the people, which is leading to higher demand for processed foods and changing lifestyle of the people. Because of all of these particular reasons, the demand for the vegetable oils or the edible oils has increased. In fact, there is one very interesting statement. Have a look at this. There is one very interesting statement. The article says that the oil demand or the expenditure elasticity on the vegetable oils is positive. I repeat, the expenditure elasticity on the edible oils or the demand for these particular oils has remained positive. What is the meaning of this? With the rising incomes of the people, with the rising incomes in the economy, the demand for the vegetable oils also has increased or edible oils also has increased. So on one side, the demand has kept on increasing, but on the other hand, the yield has not changed by much. The area has not changed by much. The production has increased, but when you compare that with the global production, the growth rate, compounded annual growth rate is much lower. What are the reasons? Why is this happening? The reasons which have been cited in this particular article are very simple. One, there is a lot of volatility in the prices. The prices are not stable. When the prices are not stable, what happens is the farmer, rather than cultivating this particular crop, will be dependent on cultivation of other crops. And another very important reason that has been cited in the article is these particular crops, whenever they are cultivated, the crops will take longer period of time compared to other crops to be cultivated, and the returns will be obtained by the farmers generally after 4 to 5 years. That is, if I start cultivating these particular crops, that is, let's say the oilseed production, if I am involved in that, I get the returns after 3 years, 4 years, etc. Whereas there are other crops which are much more competitive. I can get the returns on my investment much sooner. So because of all of these particular reasons, the article simply says that the oilseed production in India has remained stagnant compared to the global market. Now I've given one MCQ on this. Which of the following have led to stagnant oilseed production in India? Lower seed replacement rate. Statement is correct, by the way. What do you mean by lower seed replacement rate? Whenever out of the land that you're using for cultivation, more and more land you use and sow the seeds which you have purchased from the market. I'll repeat the statement. Imagine I'm using 10 hectare of a land. On this particular 10 hectare of land, if I use only a small piece of land, that is, let's say 1 hectare, and if I sow the seeds which I've purchased from the market, this is basically, right, the seed replacement rate. So the seed replacement rate in this context is very, very low. More and more land that is going to be used for cultivation should be used or should be sown with the fresh seeds, or let's say better seeds with a higher yield rate for more and more cultivation. Some of you might be thinking, sir, out of 10 hectares, you are sowing only 1 hectare using the fresh seeds. That is the seeds that you have purchased from the market. What about remaining 9 hectares? Farm saved seeds. Farm saved seeds. I have cultivated the crop in the earlier season. There are certain seeds that I have saved, right, which I have got from the crops. So I will sow these particular seeds. So understand the logic here. Whenever more and more land that is being used for cultivation will be used for sowing new seeds or fresh seeds that is purchased from the market, will simply say seed replacement rate is very, very high. But in the context of India, especially for oilseed production, the seed replacement rate is very, very low. Right? Statement 1 is correct. Marginal improvement in the yield rate. Just now we have discussed. Improvement in the yield rate is very, very small. Right, so that is also one of the reasons why there is a stagnant oilseed production. Long gestation period. I explained to you, when I cultivate these crops, I'll have to wait for 3 years, 4 years to get the returns. That is basically long gestation period. And price volatility, that is also one of the reasons why there is a stable, or let's say the stagnant growth in the oilseed production in the domestic market. So all the 4 parameters are correct. Right option for this question will be option D, 1, 2, 3 and 4. Next article, government extends RoSCTL plan for garment exports. Again, not very new. Earlier classes also we have discussed the concept of RoDTEP, RoSCTL. RoSCTL stands for the scheme for rebate of state and central taxes and levies. Don't get confused between RoDTEP and as well as RoSCTL. Both are different. RoSCTL covers small part of textiles, that is garments made up, etc. Whereas RoDTEP covers majority or a huge chunk of the goods that are exported from India. So understand the logic here. The rebate of a state and central taxes and levies, the name itself is indicating that the taxes that you have paid at central and state level, which are embedded taxes. Embedded taxes in simple terms are nothing but those taxes that you have paid as a manufacturer, or let's say as a producer, which are not covered under GST, on which you will not get the input tax credit. So these particular embedded taxes will be rebated back to you under the context of RoSCTL. Now this particular scheme, it was introduced earlier. There was one more scheme, RoSL, rebate of a state levies. Over a period of time, this RoSL has been replaced with RoSCTL, under which the taxes that you have paid both at central as well as state level now are getting rebated. Now the government of India simply has announced that this scheme or the benefits under this particular scheme will be continued to be paid till the 31st March 2024. That is just the information that you need to pick up. Apart from this, the concept remains the same. That is, embedded taxes are rebated back. Right, both the central as well as state taxes will be covered. RoSCTL focuses only on the textiles, whereas RoDTEP covers majority of the other exports. This is the gist of the article provided here. I've given a question here. Consider the following statements regarding RoSCTL. RoSCTL has been notified and implemented by the Minister of Textiles. Although you will be tempted to say correct, it is wrong. RoSCTL has been notified not by the Ministry of Textiles, but implemented by Ministry of Finance. It is the Ministry of Finance which implements these particular schemes. under the scheme, embedded taxes at the central and state level are rebated. Second statement is true. Right option for this question is option B. Let me go to the next article. States off budget borrowings. Very recently, central government has relaxed certain norms for adjusting the off budget borrowings of the states. What is the article about? Lot of technical concepts have been provided. Let's understand one by one. First and foremost, what do you mean by off budget borrowing? I'm pretty sure all of you know that union government announces a budget. Annually, union government announces a budget. Just like the union budget, even the state governments announce a budget. So whenever they want to withdraw certain money from the consolidated fund, they need the approval. Hence, they basically pass the budget, get the money or get the permission to withdraw the money. But apart from the union and the states, whenever they introduce a budget, the entities owned by the government, either the central government or state government, doesn't matter, or the special purpose vehicles which are owned by the union or center, they will borrow certain amount of money on behalf of the governments. Hope you understand this. Either you can take it only in the context of union government or in the context of state government. Don't mix both of them. Here it is talking about state government, so I'll focus on the state government agencies. So the state government agencies or entities owned by the state government or the special purpose vehicles owned by the state government, they will borrow from the market for implementation of certain objective or let's say scheme of the government. But when they borrow like this, generally they do not go through the parliamentary process or they do not go to the budget passage process. That is, introduce the bill, have a discussion, etc. These will be bypassing, I repeat, these will be bypassing the general process or the normal course of passage of the budget. So even though they are not taking the permission, they are allowed to borrow from the market. This is basically referred to as off-budget borrowing. Off-budget borrowing simply means borrowings are done without taking the parliamentary approval, without taking the approval of the legislatures like this. That is called as off-budget borrowing. Now, although the borrowing is done by the state government owned entities or the SPVs, the payment is guaranteed by the state government. Remember this. Either you talk about interest or the principal amount, the payment is guaranteed by the state government. And that is a precise reason. I'll go to the next point here. Whenever the borrowings are done like this, the overall debt, overall borrowings of the state or the union government, overall borrowings or the liabilities will be very, very high. Now, some of you might be thinking, sir, why this so much of circus? Why are they doing this kind of a circus? Simple reason is, whenever the union government or the state governments calculate their fiscal deficit, they do not count the off-budget borrowings. They do not count the off-budget borrowings. But very recently, this transparency has started to take place where they are counting this in the overall debt of the states as well as the center. Now, what is the article talking about? The states in the last 2 years, that is the financial year 21, financial year 22, have borrowed huge amount of money through the process called as off-budget borrowings. Now, what the central government has told the states is, whatever borrowings you have done in financial year 21 as well as 22 under off-budget borrowings, start counting, start adjusting that in the financial deficit or fiscal deficit that going to calculate or that would be allocated to you till 2026. Sir, what is the meaning of this? We are already confused. Great, let me explain to you. The states will have to take the approval from the central government whenever they want to borrow. Many of you will say, sir, that condition is applicable only when the states are owing money to the center. All the states in India owe the money to the center. That is a precise reason I am saying the states will have to take the approval of the center whenever they are borrowing like this. Now, annually, the central government will fix a certain amount of limit or ceilings under which the states are allowed to borrow. For example, for the current financial year, central government has given a ceiling of 3.5% of gross state domestic product, GSDP. 3.5% of gross state domestic product. The states are allowed to borrow up to this much amount. But if they are meeting certain conditions, for example, if they are implementing power sector reforms, in addition to 3.5, they can also borrow up to 0.5% of gross state domestic product. But remember, this is a conditional amount of limitation. This is unconditional. You can borrow up to 3.5. But if you meet certain conditions, you are allowed, you are given a relaxation of another 0.5%. Let me throw an arbitrary number here. Imagine here is a state. The gross state domestic product of the state comes out to be 200 crore rupees, which simply means what? 3.5% of 200 crore will be how much? 7 crore rupees. So this year the state is allowed to borrow 7 crore rupees. Now in the financial year 21 as well as 22, they have already borrowed certain amount of money through off-budget borrowings, which they did not count it in this kind of a liability or this kind of a debt. Now what the center says is, till financial year 26, whatever borrowings you have done in financial year 21 and 22, start adjusting that. Meaning what? Imagine the state has borrowed 2 crore rupees earlier in 21 and 22. If I adjust that in this year, the state will be allowed to borrow only 5 crore rupees, not 7 crore rupees. Earlier, this was the reminder, or let's say the direction that was sent by the center to the state. Now, what is the problem with this? The problem is that in the last 2 years, because of higher expenditures, specifically under revenue head, and lower amount of tax revenue collection, the states have been under a lot of pressure. They have gone out and borrowed lot of money through off-budget borrowings. Now, if you ask the states to adjust that, with the borrowings that you are going to do or the ceilings that is allocated to you till financial year 26, it simply means the states will have lower amount, or let's say lower freedom to borrow from the market. Rather than borrowing 7 crore in this example, the state now is limited to borrow only up to 5 crore. That will again have an impact on how much they can borrow, how much they can invest. Especially looking at the current situation, this will limit the growth potential or recovery potential of the states. That is the precise reason what the central government has announced is, do not worry about the off-budget borrowings of financial year 21. You don't adjust that. Only the borrowings of financial year 22, you start adjusting that till financial year 2026. Right? Start to adjust that in your ceiling till financial year 26. What is the advantage here? Now the states will have more leg space, more, let's say, leeway to borrow more amount of money from the market. So this is another very important article regarding the off-budget borrowings. I've given a question here. For the current fiscal, all the states have been allowed to borrow up to a limit of 4% of gross state domestic product without any condition. Underline the term without any condition. Statement 1 is wrong. Off-budget borrowings are to be repaid by the respective government. That is, if a state government entity borrows, right, the repayment has to be done by the state government only. Statement 2 is correct. Sir, what if the central government entity borrows? Who will repay? Central government. So, second statement is true. Right option for this question is option B, only 2. Next article, central government has raised certain concerns regarding diversion of urea. What is this? Let's try and understand. All of you know that in the agriculture sector, especially India's agriculture sector, fertilizers are required. What kind of fertilizers? There is diammonium phosphate, muriate of potash, and there is also the third, which is the most important one by far, which is consumed the highest, subsidized highest, produced highest, that is urea. Right? The component that is present in urea is nitrogen. 46% of urea is actually nitrogen by weight. Now, Government of India, because there is a lot of consumption of urea in India, provides huge amount of subsidy on this. For example, data is given here. I don't mug up because this data will keep on changing every year. For example, until recently, Government of India used to provide per kg of nutrient consumed around 18 rupees per kg in the form of subsidy. But this has been changed to more than 91 rupees in the current year. And next year, either it can increase or decrease. Don't mug up. That's the reason I'm saying. But the fact of the matter is very simple. Government of India incurs a huge amount of subsidy for providing urea at subsidized prices to farmers. Now, just like earlier, there were certain concerns regarding diversion of urea. What do you mean by diversion? I want this particular urea, which is subsidized, to be supplied to the farmer. But rather than reaching the farmer, it might so happen that this urea will be diverted, sold to an industry. Sir, will the industry use it? Of course, yes. lot of industries, for example, explosive industries, chemical industries, they require nitrogen or urea. So there would be a diversion, and the diversion would happen for a very simple reason. When the industries purchase urea, they will have to pay unsubsidized or market price. Whereas when the farmers will get the access to urea, they are given the urea at a huge amount of subsidized prices. For example, look at this data here itself. Government of India for a bag of 45 kgs of urea. Now before I go forward, very interesting question I want to ask you. Why do you think Government of India sells urea in the bag of 45 kgs? What do you think is the reason? Why not 50 kgs? Why not let's say 100 kgs? Why this odd number of 45 kgs? Try to find the answer. So have a look at this. Government, when they sell this particular 45 kg of urea bag to the farmer, it is sold at 266 rupees per bag to the farmer. And the Government of India on this particular bag incurs a subsidy of more than 2,700 rupees. Huge amount of subsidy. But on the other hand, if the industry will purchase this bag of urea, they will be able to purchase it paying the market price, not subsidized price. So generally there is a lot of diversion that used to happen. And to overcome this, back in the year 2015, the government announced a new urea policy. Under the new urea policy, we introduced the concept of neem-coated urea. The idea of neem-coated urea was introduced. What is a neem-coated urea? Neem is nothing but a crystal. It's a chemical crystal. On this chemical crystal, a neem extract was used to coat. And the objective was, if I apply the neem coating, it is not suitable for industrial purposes. It can be used for farmers, that is the agriculture sector only. But the recent investigations that have been done by the government reveal that despite having 100% neem coating in India, some of the industries, they are purchasing this neem coated urea using certain chemicals and removing the neem coating, now using the urea for industrial purposes. In simple terms, even today, though government claims 100% neem coating is done, even today, lot of diversion of subsidized urea is being done to industries. What is the problem here? Problem is, this simply means the farmers are unable to get access to subsidized fertilizer. And the beneficiaries are farmers, they are not getting the benefit. Second, because the diversion happens, Government of India incurs a huge amount of subsidy. That is, the revenue expenditure is higher because the subsidies are there. The subsidy is being incurred by the government, but the beneficiaries is someone else here. And the government says that not only diversion, some of this particular urea is also being smuggled into neighboring countries. So in order to overcome all of this, Government of India is cracking down on the diversion of urea. They have appointed certain people, or let's say certain groups, for supervision or inspections. And these particular groups are conducting surprise inspections at various places and finding where all diversion is actually happening. Done? So this is the article related to urea diversion. Next important article is related to concept of NARCL. First and foremost, what is NARCL? National Asset Reconstruction Company Limited. In order to address the legacy NPS, that is those NPS which are very old, Government of India proposed NARCL, which has started functioning now, and the first asset for which NARCL has bid, the amount is just 8% of the amount owed to the banks. That is, in simple terms, imagine a company owes 100 crore rupees to the banks, which are nothing but creditors here. The National Asset Reconstruction Company Limited has bid for this asset, has given an application to purchase this asset, but the amount that has been quoted by NARCL is just 8% of the money that is owed to the banks or the creditors by this particular company. Now, what is the name of the company? Don't worry. How many banks are there in this consortium? Don't worry. Not required for UPSC. What is the point of focus here? The point of focus is the recovery amount. Although there is insolvency and bankruptcy code in India, remember this, although there is insolvency and bankruptcy code where you can simply drag the borrower or the company to NCLT, National Company Law Tribunal, and get the recovery from here. This particular route is generally used for the fresh NPAs. What about the historical NPAs, or what about the legacy NPAs which have remained NPAs for more than a year, more than 2 years now? For this purpose only Government of India proposed NARCL, which was expected to provide relief to the banks. This is nothing but a concept of a bad bank itself, which will take over the non-performing assets from the balance sheet of the banks. But now the concern has been that the amount of money that the NARCL says that they will pay, the recovery that the banks will have or the lenders will have is very, very low. Even when you compare it to the recovery that is happening in the context of insolvency and bankruptcy code, under IBC, the recovery for this year is 10.2%. And the concern related to that is very, very low. Now, when you have this NARCL, it has given a quote which is much lower than what is the recovery under IBC. That is the concern which has been raised in this particular article in the context of the functioning of National Asset Reconstruction Company Limited. Now, in this context of NARCL, let me ask a very simple question. Let me test how much knowledge you have regarding this NARCL. The NARCL, who owns it? Who is the majority owner in the NARCL? Right? So, try to find out, comment in the section. Next article, renewable energy target. Just factual information here. Government of India back in 2015 committed that 40% of the energy, 40% of the energy that we will produce will be from renewable energy sources. Renewable energy sources or non-fossil sources. Also, again, I know some of you will point out, sir, non-fossil is slightly greater, much bigger term compared to renewable. Agreed. So, government back in 2015 under nationally determined contributions announced that 40% of the energy that they are going to produce will come from renewable energy sources. And as per the latest information provided by the government itself, the government has stated that out of 400 gigawatts, out of total 400 plus gigawatts of energy that we are producing, specifically to be very precise, the data is 402 gigawatts. Out of this, 162 gigawatts of energy comes from renewable energy sources itself. That is approximately 41% of the energy that is produced in India comes from renewable energy sources. So, the government of India has claimed that even though we set up this particular target for 2030, we had stated that by 2030 we will achieve this. Back in 2021 itself, we have achieved the target. And now government says that we will go beyond this. By 2030, we will have 500 gigawatts of renewable energy capacity. By 2030, we will have 500 gigawatts from the current 160 plus to 500 gigawatts by 2030. So, these are certain important points given in this article regarding renewable energy target. So, all these are the various important articles as well as the questions related to articles which have appeared in different newspapers from 9th July to 15th July 2022. If you like this initiative, kindly hit the like button. Provide your valuable comments in the section below. And if you have not yet subscribed to BYJU'S Exam Prep, kindly do. Thank you. Have a great day.